Hey guys, James from SIKKY Manufacturing. On this episode of our E30 Turnkey Build Series, I'm going to turn this pile of vibrant parts into a catback exhaust system for our E30. First thing to consider in any custom catback exhaust system, or in this case header back, is routing. Obviously we want to achieve the highest ground clearance possible while maintaining the best flow and ultimately the most power. There are many ways to make a custom exhaust system. I've got a couple methods that I've used over the years that I like to do, but there's no right or wrong way. Visualizing the way the exhaust is going to go and then eyeing up the first couple cuts and angles is my preferred method. Once I get them eyed up and in place where I want them and make sure the clearance is right, the trajectory of the exhaust is in the direction that I want it to go, then my preferred method at that point is to tack the pieces together on the car just to make sure it's perfect fit. We use stainless wire and shielded gas on our MIG welder to do this. Then once we get it tacked up, we remove it and fully TIG weld it while back purging. Here we're using a Y pipe. We're going from 2 to 1, and we're using an ultra quiet resonator also to get the exhaust tone where we want it. This is one of the most complicated joints on this particular exhaust system because the two pipes have to come together, so using this little pie cut piece allows me to get the angle perfect on the passenger side, so when it merges it's at the right angle and everything fits perfect. That thing's pretty close. Time to tack it and slide the Y merge on. And now the resonator. Now we're ready to add the rear V-band to make this exhaust a two-piece. Just makes it easier to remove it if you have to in sections. You can see the front half of the exhaust is all tacked up, and we're going to reinstall the factory brace that we took off just to make sure it wasn't in the way. This particular exhaust design leaves us enough room where we can still run it, so we might as well. At this point I need to support the rear section of the exhaust before I continue any further. I like to use a pole jack. It's a good way to keep it in place and not put all that stress on the tack welds while we continue to route and tack together the exhaust piping. Yeah, I'm gonna need some more parts. Now it's time to start the rear half of the exhaust, which will route to a muffler and then out the back end of the car. There's a lot of eyeing things up and visualizing the exhaust. It's just, again, a method that I've learned over the years where it's I kind of feel like it's almost like sculpting, where you got to visualize the bends, the angles, and piece it together to the point where it's a smooth transition. There's no hard bends or sharp turns in the exhaust. Again, trying to maintain the balance between maximum power and performance and fit and function. Clearance is important, so constantly checking how much room we've got between things that could hit it is an important step, and continually visualizing the path and the angles we're going to be taking the exhaust out through the back of the car. I like to use a trans jack to hold the muffler in place. This just allows me to make sure that stays still and kind of basically connect the dots at this point and join the back half of the exhaust to the muffler itself. Now we got it pretty much tacked up. Get the muffler into position and make sure the final adjustments are made to the position of the pipe. And now I got to weld up some exhaust hangers to support the weight of the exhaust. A little massaging of the hammer gets this exhaust hanger at the right angle. Now it's time to TIG the whole system together. First step is we set up back purge on this. We want to make sure we have that gas inside the tube. That way the weld goes all the way through and it looks like a mirror image on the inside. This ensures the maximum strength and reliability of the system. Here you can see the back purge line coming out of the back end of the exhaust. All the joints are welded and this thing's ready to go back in the car. Nope, actually. Now we're forming a brace for the Y. Again, this strengthens the Y, which can be a weak point, so we want to make sure there's no excess movement between either tube on the way back to the collector. Time to get this thing in place for a final install and make sure everything looks good. We prefer to use V-band clamps. You just don't have the same issues you do with the traditional flange and gasket combo. Plus it makes it a lot easier when you're doing the install. There's not as many bolts and hardware to mess around with. Now the exhaust is hanging on its hangers and nice and solid. Passes the wiggle test, but you want to make sure there's not a lot of movement in this system. Alright, now we got the exhaust all wrapped up. It's time to get the intake set up on this thing. For this E30 build, we decided to run our 4-inch straight LS3 intake. It's a universal intake, so it's not meant for the E30 chassis, but either way it works perfect for this setup with a little bit of trimming on the silicone. If you notice, our 90's got a longer straight on this side versus this side, so if you put it up this way, it's going to be a little bit too short to get perfectly between the radiator and the power steering pump. So I'm actually going to flip it around and then trim about a ½ inch off of the silicone. It'll put it in the perfect position to come down between the radiator and the power steering pump reservoir, putting the filter exactly where we want it. So there's a couple ways to cut silicone. You try to get a clean edge. I like to use a really sharp razor blade. And then you can actually position the clamp to kind of act like a guide. So that way it's somewhat straight all the way around. Basically put the clamp on there. It doesn't have to be super tight because you don't want to deform, but basically start scoring it and cutting in until you pop through the other side and then work your way all the way around. And then we position this so the mass airflow sensor adapter flange is just past the reservoir here. SIKKY logo up, works out pretty good. You can install the filter before you put the tube in, but because this is kind of adjustable, by pushing this tube into this coupling further or pulling it out, you can change the position where the filter is. So I'm going to put the filter on afterwards, just rotate this up to make it a little bit easier. Alright, get this filter installed. Again, you might want to leave it a little bit loose so you position it just right. It kind of drops down in here perfectly and clears everything. So once you get it in position, then you can tighten up the clamp. I got the intake all wrapped up. Just got to get the mass airflow sensor in here and plugged in. And we're getting real close to being able to fire this puppy up. Alright, so that's a wrap on this Project LS E30 episode. I hope you guys like the way this thing sounds, and it's starting to look pretty amazing. Can't wait to get it out on the street. So next episode, we're doing some dyno and a little bit of road testing and really see what this thing can do.